Did I mess up my first Enve Melee build? I think I did get it wrong the first time. It just didn't stick. Wrong tires, bars that didn't feel right. It was a lesson in how much the details matter. But today we're taking a fresh look at a Melee that's been completely reimagined. In this video, I'll break down the changes I made, my initial impressions on how it's changed the bike, fit, build performance, and why sometimes all that a bike needs is a second chance. And if you're looking for any new or used gear at a discount, I've added some items to the yard sale section of my website, outdoorbros.com. I've added a couple helmets, tires, and I have a frame as well that I need to put on there. So it's spring cleaning season. I need to make room for projects like this one by Melee that we're talking about today. So is the Melee worth a second look? Let's dive in. Almost everything on this bike is Enve branded. It's a size 56 frame in a color that Enve calls, drumroll please, Enve Black. It has Enve SES 4.5 wheels, the Enve Aero bars in 37 centimeters, 120 millimeter Enve Aero in-route stem, Enve bar tape, Enve CIM bottle cages, an Enve seat post, a co-branded Enve and Selle Italia saddle. The SRAM drivetrain is where I went a little bit outside of the norm from my previous builds. It's a one-by. We'll talk more about that later. It has a 3D printed chain guide made by my friend Ashley at the Rose and Crown, formerly known as the Force Training. If you're interested, drop him a line on Instagram if you want one of these. It has Shimano Ultegra pedals, and I use a Wahoo Element Roam computer. The tires are 32 millimeter Continental Grand Prix 5000 STRs, but they will soon be replaced with 29 millimeter Enve Race Day tires. I've had those in for a little while, I'm meaning to test them, and on this setup, it just feels right. The total weight, as you see it here, minus the Wahoo, is 16.4 pounds. So it's not the heaviest, but it's also not the lightest bike I've ever had. And there are some who make a strong case for a bike not being feather light, arguing that there's a little more confidence and stability with the right weight. What do you think? Drop me a comment below and let me know your thoughts. How does it compare to my previous Melee? In hindsight, my first Melee was good, but it needed a couple changes to make it what I had really hoped that it would be. I think the first mistake I made was tires. I started it off with 30 millimeter Goodyear Eagle F1 tires. A decent tire, but not what I'm accustomed to. And second, I think I made the biggest mistake with the bars. The first Melee had 42 centimeter Enve AR bars. A good bar, but maybe a little bit too wide for me. That's a bar that measures 42 centimeters at the hoods and 47 centimeters at the drops. Everyone has their preferences, but just didn't work for me. On gravel, something that wide, sure, but road, that's just way too wide. This is a good reminder of just how important your position is on the bike. You can have the fastest, most aerodynamic bike on the market, but pair it with a poor fit and positioning, and the aerodynamic gains that you've just kind of bought into are quickly lost. It also goes the other way. Take a bike that's less aerodynamic and spend time dialing in your fit and position, and you can make up for a less aerodynamic setup. Now keep that in mind next time you're tempted to buy the latest and greatest setup just to save a few watts. In the case of the Melee, I've moved to the 37 centimeter Enve Aero bars. Now these measure 37 centimeters at the hoods and 42 centimeters at the drops, a full 5 centimeters narrower than the AR bars that I had on the previous Melee. That's a big deal, and it's one that's noticeable when you're on the road. Then you have aesthetics. I think Damascus Gray is a beautiful frame color, but I'm a sucker for an all black bike, and this Melee in Enve Black is about as black as it gets. It's matte black with a little gloss on the inside of the frame and fork, with gloss Enve logos on the head tube, underneath the down tube, and on the back side of the seat tube. I've had a lot of bikes come through here. I've owned a lot of black bikes, and I think that this is the best looking bike that I have ever owned. There's something about the visual simplicity of this bike that I love. It's the exact opposite of a billboard bike, except for the wheels. Those white logos are purposefully kind of in your face. There's a good contrast, I think, between the black and the white. I love them. Now to top it all off, I've built this with the 1x drivetrain with the 48-2 solid black Aero chainring. I've always loved the look of a solid chainring, and I think that it, along with the solid pulley wheels of the CeramicSpeed OSPW RS, perfectly complement this build. That's not to say that the build is aesthetically perfect. I still don't love the slope of the top tube on the Melee. Something about it just, I don't know, just doesn't do it for me. It never has. Now, I went back and forth about whether to go with a 48 tooth or a 50 tooth chainring. I ran tons of different configurations through multiple gear ratio calculators, and I ultimately went with my gut on what I felt would be best for riding around here. I've been riding a 48-35 with a 10-33 cassette for quite a while, and it's not uncommon for me to ride locally in that 48 for a week or more. Now pair that with the 1036 cassette, and I'm confident that this can comfortably get me through probably 95% of the riding that I do. And that CeramicSpeed OSPW RS keeps everything kind of in line and running nice and smoothly. Considering I was firmly planted in the 2x camp not long ago, I have to laugh a little bit about the idea of having a 1x road bike. I mean, it wasn't long ago that I was preaching 2x on both road and gravel bikes, but my thinking has evolved, and I think SRAM has a lot to offer with that 1036 cassette, be it Force or Red. I mean, it really doesn't matter. The fact is that you can descend plenty fast with a 4810 and climb quite a bit with a 4836. If the Melee were UDH compatible, you could pair it with the Explorer drivetrain, and while the jumps between gears might be bigger than you'd like, the range would make you maybe forget about 2x altogether. I have to say that, thankfully my first impressions have been positive on this build. I have a standard loop that I take all my bikes on, and even though it's been almost 2 years since I'd ridden a Melee, it felt very familiar. The things that I liked about the Melee are, of course, still there. It's surprisingly stiff, it's responsive, and the ride quality is raw, and I mean that in the best way. In many ways, it reminds me of the feeling of riding the last of the great Aero bikes before that craze went away to make room for what we have now, which are kind of these do-it-all bikes. And in an era when bikes are expected to be ultra light, have best-in-class handling, and be aerodynamic, the Melee is kind of like a pick 2 of 3. You don't get it all, but you get character and an exciting experience. In 2025, I feel like that's kind of rare. I mean, we're so focused on bikes being everything to everyone. I fear that we might have lost a little character in the pursuit of doing it all with every single new bike. Make no mistake, the Melee is undeniably a generation old, but it's also from an exceptional generation of bikes and ahead of its time with features like 35mm tire clearance, something that we see kind of standard on most road bikes today. I've said it before and I'll say it again, that the 2020 or the COVID era produced some of the best bikes I've ever ridden, and the current era of bikes is just marginally better. I mean, there's some progress, but it's a slow progress. Since the Melee was Enve's first production bike, its product cycle is unknown, but I'd put it at 3 or 4 years, which means we'll see a new Melee within the next 18 months. And it's come a long way since the launch in summer of 2022. Back then, it seemed like the messaging was less about winning races and aerodynamics and more about the Melee being designed around what Enve had learned from their custom road project, which still exists today. You can get a hand-built Enve bike that's made at their factory in Ogden, Utah. Fast forward to today, and it's now being ridden in world tours by Total Energies. It even nabbed a win at stage 9 of the tour last year. My guess is that we'll see some radical changes with the next version of the Melee in hopes of not only going head-to-head with the current generation of superbikes, but leapfrogging the competition. Based on what we've all seen since the launch of the Melee, I think that Enve has the data and experience to pull it off, and look, I'm here for it. Now back to the Melee at hand. I'm thrilled to put more miles on this build. If you've been following along on Strava or on Instagram, you've seen snippets of this bike. I think I've already logged close to 300 miles on it at this point. So what questions do you have about this build? The bike, the 1x setup, the bars? Ask away in the comments below. I'll do my best to respond as quickly as possible, or just shoot me a message on Instagram. I'll do a follow-up review on this build at around 1,000 or 1,500 miles. I think at that point I'll have worked through all of the kinks and really probably figured out the limitations of this 1x drivetrain for all of my local riding. If you like this video, I'll post links to some of my other builds up above or down below. And look out for some content on the new Scott Addict RC Pro. I've got it in for kind of a long-term review. Just landed this week. So it's a full Dura Ace build. And yes, as someone who's been on SRAM for ages, I've already engaged the front derailleur by mistake. Anyways, I'm excited to put some miles on it and give you my opinion. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time.